I'm Randy Nybor. I'm a biologist who worked with the Illinois DNR and the Illinois Natural History Survey. And today we're in the middle of Apple River Canyon. It's one of the most unusual natural areas probably in the state of Illinois. And this area was first, I guess you might say, looked at to be a state park in Illinois. Back in, I believe it was 1918, at the time by a fella that was a botanist around here. His name was Herman Pepcoon, not Peccoon. And he had found the bird's eye primrose on the cliffs here.
Oh, we're here in Apple River Canyon State Park, and we're looking at one of the dry cliffs on the north-facing slope of along the river, and we're just looking at some of the typical vegetation that's here. As you see, quite a few ferns along here. That's the bulblet fern that usually grows right on the limestone like this, the dolomite, and of course they're being north-facing. It's a little moister. It doesn't dry out as much as some of the cliffs over on the other side. So you end up getting quite a bit more vegetation growing on this area. The white camas that's back here on the cliff with the grass-like leaves that are hanging down, it's one of the 16 plants that are found here in Apple River Canyon that are on the state endangered species list. It will flower later on, in probably late July, early August, that sort of thing, with a big long plume of white flowers. Really a gorgeous plant, but it's scattered all along the cliffs here in the canyon. It's in that lily family that you'll see that you'll find onions and things like that growing in there. Yeah, that's a pretty cool one, but you'll usually find that quite commonly on these areas. That's a monster. They find crevices to work into and eventually expand them a little bit. So it looks like there might be some columbine over there. There's anemones, there's bulblet fern. Up there looks like Solidago sciaphila, the cliff goldenrod, which is a threatened species. It's the cliff goldenrod, Solidago sciaphila. I see below, that's the grass-like plant is hairbill, campanula. And I'm trying to see what else. That's the rue anemone. This nice draping evergreen here is native Canada yew, and it's one of those northern plants that you'll find here in Apple River Canyon, and it's left over from the Ice Age when this was a big refugium, that you'll commonly see it growing on these north-facing slopes, and the deer just love to eat it. So the places that are protected like this, the Canada yew is going to be in very good shape. A refugium, that's where this area was protected from the glaciers, both the Illinois and Wisconsin glaciers. It's part of what they call the Paleozoic Plateau. It's found in Illinois, Wisconsin, Iowa, and Minnesota. And Illinois only has about 10% of that area called the driftless area, that refugium where the glaciers didn't cover the area. And plants like this that were probably very common at the end of glaciation found these places like this to stay because they weren't overrun by the ice.
You know, the geologic history of Apple River Canyon is really unique. First of all, the bedrock that we're seeing here was put down about 485 million years ago to 425 million years ago, when this was a large warm sea. And we don't think of warm seas being here in Illinois, but at the same time, when this bedrock was being formed, this part of Illinois, well, the whole United States was about 15 degrees below the equator. So when this bedrock was being made, this area was below the equator. So over the years that we've heard of the continental drift, that type of thing, the United States, North American continent, finally drifted north. And when it did, it dried out, and these cliffs, this sort of thing, were exposed. And this area was missed by the glaciers. The most recent one, the Wisconsin Glacier, was quite a bit further south, but the Illinois Glacier stopped about 3 miles from the north end of where the main park is. There's a ridge along there, and the Apple River used to flow into that area. And once the glacier stopped at that ridge, it formed a large glacial lake that eventually, as it began to, the meltwaters came down, they formed this canyon. So it was about 225,000, 250,000 years ago when the canyon was actually formed. So it's a one-of-a-kind canyon of this type in Illinois. It's really unique. There are 16 actually, species, endangered species grows in the canyon here. And these are relics left over from just around the Ice Age and thereafter. Because this area was missed by glaciation, this was a refugium where a lot of plants and animals were able to still persist when while the glaciers were around this area. And because it didn't override and destroy these cliffs, this sort of thing, a lot of these plants are still here. Normally you would find them much further north in Canada or northern Wisconsin, this sort of thing. Some of these plants are pretty much found just any place north of here. Stuff like the white camas, and we've got the cliff goldenrod, this type of thing. A lot of these plants are just left over from when the Ice Age was here. The white pines that we saw earlier, the Canada yew that we saw earlier, those at one time, this whole area was nothing more than a spruce pine forest. Harebell, the Campanula rotundiflora, folia, excuse me. Yeah, there's a bunch of it all through here. This is the cliff goldenrod, and it's a threatened species in Illinois, but it's pretty common here in the canyon. Ideal habitat for it. And you'll find it on these north-facing slopes as well as the south-facing slopes. And this is the flowering head of it right here. Yes, the bulblet fern here is very common on the limestone. And this time of year, you can't find the bulblets on there. They form a little bit later on in the summer, but they'll drop off and they can like land on a ledge or in another little cavity like this and grow a new fern, as well as the spores that it forms. So it can reproduce sexually and asexually, put it that way. Oh, I was going to say, in the columbine here, you can see it's going to be flowering for too much longer. But all these are rock-loving plants. And a plant with 3 names. Sullivantia is also known as Sullivantia. So, but it's a state-threatened species. and it pretty much is only found up here in northern Illinois. It does get in, I think, one location down by in LaSalle County, but it loves these moist crevices. If you can see the water dripping off some of these areas like this, and it has a nice little stalk of white flowers, but it's pretty much only found here in the Midwest. Lustrous green, that Sullivantia.
Nice and shiny.
It is.
I've heard it called coolwort too.
Coolwort?
Sullivan's coolwort.
Really?
I think that's what they call it up in Wisconsin. WDNR calls it.
I can understand why, because you feel the air
Oh
right
yeah.
here.
On a nice hot day, this would be the place to be.
Yeah, with the moisture coming out of the rock, and like this, it really cools this whole microclimate in through here, and that's where you can see water dripping off the mosses and some around some of the ferns like that, and it just creates a really cool climate in here that allows for these plants still to persist. And it's going to be interesting to see what climate change does.
Right.
Something.
Well, if you look closely back here, it looks like the moss. I can't tell if that's rock that's almost kind of honeycombed and full of holes, or if that's moss hanging
that's the
down?
moss.
Is it just clumps of moss hanging down, or
I
is it
think it
just
is,
kind of
but
honeycombed rock?
Just a gentle. Oh no, it's
Oh,
rock.
it is rock.
That is rock.
I couldn't tell if it was all moss or all rock. Cool.
Well, here's a crustose lichen right here, Lopraria, and this is a little foliose lichen here, and I'm not sure just which one that one is. It might be. Looks like it's got what they call the Prunose Ceredia on it. But, oh yes, and we have purple cliffbreak fern here. It's one of, there's about 15 species of ferns found here in the canyon. And this is another one of those that loves to climb on the rocks like this. Just hangs on.
I'm Jim Johansson. I'm with Joe Davis Conservation Foundation. I'm the Director of Conservation out there. And we're standing here in the Apple River Canyon on property owned by Natural Land Institute, the recent Townsend Glade addition to Apple River Canyon. And behind me, the land on the other side of the river is actually part of the state park, Apple River Canyon State Park. And for about 90 years now, different conservation groups around the state have been working to protect the canyon. We're kind of at the southern end of the canyon here, but if you follow the canyon upstream another 5 or 6 miles, you'll find the first piece of Apple River Canyon State Park, protected way back in 1930s. And ever since then, various conservation groups have been working to slowly acquire little bits of the canyon and protect the whole corridor.
This is blue cohosh. This is usually considered a conservative forest forb. It has a nice blue fruit on it. It's like a small grape. And kind of unusual to see it growing right here, but you can see there's a couple of plants of it here. All through, I had to look at to see if there is the anemone quinquefolia, and that is not it. I was counting leaflets.
That is Solomon seal there. And you can see the gooseberry hanging off there, and there's some, looks like maybe some wild ginger.
We're looking at this meadow rue here, the Philiptricum, and there's both male flowers and female flowers. And here we can see the male flowers with the anthers hanging out, showing off, for this little female plant right over here with her flowers. Not quite so elegant. All right, saxifrage we're seeing here grows on these moist rock faces that we're seeing here. It's usually permanently wet or a seepage there. And sometimes you'll find them in fens and that sort of thing. You can see this one up here. It's starting to flower. It's sending up a nice spike. And probably by the end of the month, it's going to be in full bloom, which is kind of a yellowish green flower to it. That's a maidenhair fern that's just starting to unfurl the fronds there to it. And it's very common in these mesic situations like this. And it's I think one of the most delicate ferns in the woods. Yeah, this is getting just about as far north as you'll find it. You'll find it in Wisconsin. I think it's an endangered species in Wisconsin. We got Dutchman's breeches there. And we have bloodroot here that's already finished flowering. Here's anise root over here. Really a rich slope here.
Years ago, probably 12 or 13 years ago, Natural Land Institute made contact with the previous owners of this property, Jim and Kitty Rhodes. And at the time, Natural Land Institute's message was essentially, if they're ever interested in selling the property, they should call NLI first. So fast forward to, I think it was 2016, Jim and Kitty were getting ready to sell, and they contacted Natural Land Institute. But being more than an hour away from the site, NLI decided it was more strategic to work with their local partner, which is Joe Davis Conservation Foundation, and we're just about 20 minutes down the road. So Joe Davis Conservation Foundation facilitated the acquisition and the grant writing and the restoration plan. The land eventually ended up under the ownership of NLI, and now we kind of have a joint management agreement to open it up for public access and try to restore some of the habitats that have been degraded over time. So beginning in 2019, we started restoring a couple of remnant dolomite hill prairies on a south bluff, maybe a quarter mile south of where we're standing. Over time, the hill prairies had been encroached upon by eastern red cedar due to lack of prescribed fire, and we've been opening up those hill prairies by removing those cedars over the last few years. There's also about 40 acres of tillable land planted in corn and soybeans, and this year we're starting the process of reforesting those areas. So we'll be establishing a ground cover to suppress any weeds that might come up in those retired agricultural fields, and then this time next year we'll be planting thousands of hardwood tree seedlings, oaks, hickories, cherries, walnuts, to try to close the canopy. What about these kind of triangular shaped leaves?
No, that's that whole splitter, or it's a PreDante's.
Oh, I don't know that one.
This thing's going to have little round leaves, kind of like, kind of about that size. Oh, those lovely conifers are native white pines. And at one time, they covered this whole area, mix of pine and spruce forest, probably about 10,000, 12,000 years ago. And these are some of the relics that are left over from the Ice Age. And gradually, we'll probably lose them, but they've been here for the last almost 10,000 years. This is the poster flower of Apple River Canyon. This is the bird's eye primrose. This is a very rare plant that's only found in the canyon here in Illinois. This is probably the furthest south it's found in the United States. This is what got Herman Pepoon really excited about this area. He discovered this in 1908. He proposed in, I think it was 1918, that this become a state park with the Friends of the Parks, the group that Jens Jensen started over in the Chicago area to get protect significant natural areas in the state. And in 1932, Apple River Canyon became a state park. Now, this plant is found, it's endangered in Illinois. It's a species of concern in Wisconsin. You'll find it on these cliffs like this in Wisconsin and in Iowa too. At one location, I believe it's at Pine Hollow Nature Preserve. But you can see it likes these drip walls. Now, when Pepoon first found this here, it used to cover all these drip walls on this entire face. In fact, when it was in bloom, he said that the cliffs were pink. And we're seeing some differences here now. We're seeing things like these grasses come in and occupying a lot of the habitat that this plant used to occur in. And we think that with potentially climate change, the drying of the areas, although this area, these drip walls are very active today, this plant may be on its way out here, unfortunately. But as it is, for what you can see today, that it's a gorgeous little plant, and like I said, it's kind of the poster flower for Apple River Canyon.